Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of ANC 34G, our regular meeting on the second Monday of July. We meet on the second and the fourth Mondays of each month. I'm Randy Speck. I'm beginning the meeting. I'm the chair of the meeting to begin, but we'll have an election for officers in a moment. But until then, I'll run the meeting. We are meeting. I'm first of all, I am the commissioner that represents ANC 34G03. That's basically the area between Nebraska and Utah and Broad Branch. And we'll introduce the other commissioners who are here tonight. We have a full house. Chaz, you want to go next?
Sure, I'm Chaz Cadwell. I'm the commissioner representing 34G07, which is bounded roughly by Reno Road, Military, Nebraska, and over toward Nevada. Happy to be here tonight.
Connie?
Good evening. My name is Connie Chang. I'm the commissioner for Single Member District 05, which is bounded by the east side of Connecticut, starting at Legation Street, and it goes up to the Circle, around Western, down Broad Branch Road, and in between Nevada and Chevy Chase Parkway down to Jocelyn.
And John?
I'm Commissioner John Higgins for ANC Single Member District 02. My district runs basically from Military to Aberfoyle, north to south, and from Oregon to Utah, east to west.
Lisa?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Gore. I'm the ANC Commissioner for 34G01, which serves Hawthorne and Barnaby Woods. And my boundaries are Western Avenue, Oregon Avenue, Beach, take out the tributary and around a little bit past Pinehurst Circle, and I think my last street's 31st, and back around down Western.
Okay, Peter?
I'm Peter Gosselin. I'm the commissioner for District 6, which is the west side of Connecticut Avenue back to 41st Street, from Western Avenue and the Chevy Chase Circle to Military, and to the east of Connecticut to Chevy Chase Parkway between Kanawha and Legation. Good to be here tonight.
And Michael?
I am Michael Zeldin, 3G04, which the big part of it is Lafayette Elementary. So I go from Broad Branch up to Western, between one side of Upland through Morrison, bounded by, as I said, Broad Branch and Utah and Nebraska.
Okay, we have 7 commissioners tonight, so we have a quorum and can conduct business. The first order of business is to adopt the agenda, which has been circulated on our website and on the various social media. Is there any modification or change? I should note that we did take one item off of the originally posted agenda, the discussion with District Bridges regarding needed improvements in the Chevy Chase Main Street. And we moved that to our next meeting on July 25th. Okay, with that modification, and that's been posted as well, are there any modifications or changes anyone else would like to make? All those in favor of adopting the agenda? 7-0. Again, tonight we are meeting virtually. That means that the commissioners will all have audio and video throughout the meeting. We will then, when we get to various items in the agenda, recognize particular people who will participate, and will make them change their status from attendee to panelist so that they will have audio and video as well. And we are recording the meeting, and it will be on our YouTube website beginning tomorrow. Okay, the first item that is on our agenda is an election of a new chair. And I mentioned at our last meeting that I was not going to run again in November, and that I would be stepping down as chair effective with this meeting. That necessitates the election of a new chair. I was particularly interested in stepping down as chair now, so that I would have a period of time to work with the new chair to make sure that the transition goes smoothly. And I have every confidence that our commission will continue to be in very good hands going forward. So we've had some discussions about who was interested in continuing to lead the commission. And I think we've agreed that the best way to do this, the way that's going to create the least disruption, would be for Lisa Gore to be elevated from vice chair to chair. And then I would then take the vice chair position for the remainder of this year. There will be a new election beginning next year. So I would move that Lisa Gore be elected the chair, and that I would then be elected as vice chair for the remainder of this year. Any discussion by any of the commissioners?
Second.
You can't.
Okay. Of course you can. All those in favor? 7-0. Okay, I will turn the virtual gavel over to Lisa and let her run the meeting and all the subsequent meetings. And I look forward to her leadership in the commission. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for the commissioners for supporting both of us throughout the last year and a half.
Wow. Thank you, Randy, and thank you, fellow commissioners. So we'll continue on with the meeting, but just let me say again, thank you, Randy, for everything that you've done for the commission. You are definitely big shoes to follow, huge shoes to follow. And I look forward to working with you on this part of the transition so we can continue to move the ANC forward. So with that, we're at announcements. Commissioner announcements. I have a few that I would like to make. One, and I know, John, you sent the commission email regarding the National Park Service proposal on seasonal use of Beach Drive. I think you're going to discuss that in your portion. Is that correct?
Yes, just very briefly, it just came in today, but I think we should make note of it. And we should probably also post something on the website as well. Okay.
One announcement I do want to make, this was out of Councilmember Louis George's newsletter, where there's a DC homeownership fund for folks that have fallen behind. It's a federal relief program for the Homeowner Assistance Fund here in DC. It can cover up to $120,000 in eligible expenses regarding payments on your mortgage, expenses, basically homeownership fees, co-op fees, utilities. There, I will give you, Peter, the link to that. But just please, if anyone knows anyone within the ANC or anyone within a community that's fallen behind due to the pandemic relief in terms of homeownership issues, we can get them some assistance on that. There's a lot going on, and I believe, I don't know if someone is here from her staff. Hopefully they go over some of the things. Councilmember Louis George does a great job with giving updates. So there's a lot of things happening on the Ward 4 side. There is also another relief program that I want to go over, and this one is offered by Washington Gas. And it's an arrearage management program. And that is also something that is available to people that have fallen behind COVID-19 in terms of your gas payments. So a couple of things in terms of homeownership relief that I think we should focus on and make sure that the community is aware of. And Peter, I will give you the link to that as well.
Good.
Those are my announcements. Randy?
I had a couple of announcements, and the first is with regard to ANC elections coming up. We do want to encourage everyone to pick up petitions and get the 25 required signatures and be on the November 8th ballot. Being on the ANC is a very rewarding and important aspect of our community. And certainly my position is going to be vacant. And so we're looking for someone to fill that position. The deadlines for picking up your petitions, you can pick them up beginning on July 20th. And then they have to be turned in by August the 10th. And you need 25 signatures from people who are in your single member district. And we'll be putting a link in our minutes to the Office of Planning's website, where they have a map of the new SMD boundaries. And that's going to be important because you have to make sure that you get your signatures from the people who live within your SMD boundaries. And anyone can run if they've lived in the SMD for as long as 6 months at the time of the election. And so it could be even someone who's moved fairly recently into the neighborhood. And for those who are particularly interested in running, Greater Washington is hosting a Zoom training session on Thursday, July 21st at 6 p.m. And you can register. We'll have a link for that registration as well, but you can check on Greater Washington's website. You can also feel free to contact me or any of the other commissioners. If you have any questions about running or serving as a commissioner, we'll be glad to talk to you and help you on that. The other announcement that I have is with regard to Bingham Drive, which we've talked about several times before. It has some relationship to what's going to happen on Beach Drive, but not very much, actually. They are now beginning work on the restoration of Bingham Drive, which has been closed for 3 or 4 years now, maybe even longer than that. Work on erosion and silt control began last week and should be completed this week. Once that work has been inspected, the contractor and the subcontractor will be authorized to proceed with the restoration work, which is expected to take approximately 120 days. And DC Water expects to approve a schedule soon, and we'll be providing that to the commission, and we'll make sure that gets out to the community as well. Thank you, Lisa. You're muted, Lisa.
Chance, then Peter.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to follow on Randy's talking about the petition prospect for candidates for the ANC to share with people what I hope to post on the listserv soon. That is that I won't be running for election in the fall. I've enjoyed this panel enormously and the colleagues all, but it just takes more than I have time for given my several other commitments. And I'll explain more fully, but I want to encourage those of my neighbors who are interested to talk to me. I'll be happy to explain the ins and the outs and help good candidates put things together.
Thank you. We'll miss you. Peter?
Yeah, I must say, we're going to have a little hard time selling people on the idea of joining this commission if everybody's resigning. I have several announcements. Let me start with the most immediate one. There have been a series of fires, many of them in dumpsters, but they also include a garage that almost torched a house. They include the shrubbery on the east side of the Chevy Chase Library. These have occurred since April 24th, since June 24th, a great number of them on June 29th, and as recently as Sunday. I finally reached the community prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office today, who did not give us a great deal of comfort. I organized a walk around with Captain Frenzel of the 2nd District MPD the day after the June 29th fires. And in the course of our walk around, police spotted a suspect and took him into custody. But when they forwarded the documents to the U.S. Attorney's Office, which handles criminal cases for the district, they, as they say in the business, no-papered it. Assistant U.S. Attorney Doug Klein says that he is not permitted to explain why, or even if they no-papered it. I asked if he could give residents any tips about how we could help make cases. He said, there's a quote, "We're always very happy to have video." I understand, and I think probably this commission ought to have a session at some point in the future on video cameras and security cameras. But I have been encouraging businesses and residents in the area to get, you choose the make, but Ring cameras or otherwise, they have the following few advantages, which they notify you in real time if there's something going on your property. They have the capacity to let you talk or yell at who's ever, doing whatever it is. They also have the capacity to send a notice right to the police. Loads of privacy issues, I think, involved in this, but frankly, given that this case was no papered, neighbors are, and rightfully, are on pins and needles. We just don't, there is somebody out there who lit all these fires and we don't know who it is. So that's on that subject. Secondly, at our June 13th meeting, we voted to establish a second standing committee on zoning, design, and development that will include two commissioners, my colleague Connie Chang and me, and space for 3 to 5 members of the community. We're interested if you have experience in planning, zoning, design, but it is not a requirement. You can notify either Commissioner Chang or me. The application period or a nomination period is open from this moment until our September 12th meeting. You will get free of charge a copy of the resolution we passed that created this committee and that explains what we see as its rights and obligations. And you can decide for yourself whether you're interested. I just say, and I think this is the reason the commission agreed on this, these issues have been hot for the entire time this commission has been sitting, and they are likely to be for the foreseeable future. Just two other things, a small one. My regular issue with Military Road and Chevy Chase Parkway, DDOT's, the Department of Transportation's liaison to us, wrote me this afternoon to say that they'll be out marking the new pavement between Legation and Military on Chevy Chase Parkway with a warning sign that drivers are approaching a dangerous intersection, and put up the bollards again tomorrow. Great news. And finally, I'd say with all the switching around, I just remind commissioners that you need to give me texts on announcements. And that goes for community announcements too. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have announcements? John, go on.
I was just going to mention the National Park Service decision.
Yeah.
Today on July 11th, NPS issued its proposal for Beach Drive. And they also provided an environmental assessment document, which people can look at. The proposal is to close it to motorists between Memorial Day and August 31st of each year, but to keep it open the rest of the year. The idea there was that it was during the summertime, there would be less traffic and more visitors. And so it would enhance visitors coming to DC, while in the regular commuter times, it would be at regular service level. Two things about that: they are going to have a public hearing on July 18th at 6:30 to 8 p.m. And they also will be taking comments through August 11th. So Connie and Peter, I'll send you notifications of this so that we can put information up on our website as to where people can go. There is a link, which I think is better than the press release. So I will provide that to you for residents to check out. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Just one last comment. Tomorrow, on July 12th, tomorrow is the final legislative meeting for the council before they go on summer recess. And way down on the agenda is reading and vote on a proposed resolution for the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan. So for those of you that have been following that, there's a draft resolution out there. I know it's not in final state, but that proposed resolution number is 24580. And I believe it's on the council site. If you go under their legislative section for meetings, I believe it's under there. If you have a chance, tune in to see how that's going to turn out. Anyone else have any announcements on the commission before I move on to the community? Okay. Community announcements. If you guys have any out there, raise your hand. I see Amir has raised his hand.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mhm.
Great, new place, sorry. So my name is Amir Guravantab. I'm with the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services, colloquially known as MOCRS, here to provide a few updates from the government side of things. First of all, I want to thank everyone, commissioners and residents that came out last week to the 4th of July parade at the Palisades. It was a wonderful parade, very nice weather. We got to walk down MacArthur Boulevard with the mayor, and it was a great day. So thank you all for coming to that. Second thing, in continuation to last month's request for you guys to help me help you. Last month, or possibly May, I forgot now, but one of those meetings I had asked for anyone to report any overgrown grasses and weeds, as there was an issue with NPS with their contract that got resolved. Thank you for everyone that did actually reach out. We got a few meetings mowed, including one on Broad Branch Road. So very good job. And I want to extend that to DGS properties. So for those who don't know, DGS is the District of Columbia's government agency that is responsible for maintaining and building on government properties. So schools, parks, rec centers, things like that. Commissioner Zeldin did point out that at Pointer Recreation Center, the splash pads are covered in algae. And that's an example of something that we want to flag when we see something like that. It's summer break right now, so the schools aren't being used. So it's a good time for schools to go through any renovations and things like that, as well as making sure our parks are up to standard, including splash pads and things like that. So if anyone does notice anything on the public space, parks, schools, stuff like that, that need to be repaired, please reach out to me and I'll have my contact information at the end for you to do that. I also wanted to piggyback off of a couple of things that commissioners also mentioned, starting with Commissioner Gore, who did mention a federal program for mortgage relief as part of the COVID relief fund. So on top of that, I also wanted to mention another federal program, which is the Affordable Connectivity Program. This gives you $30 per month if you qualify off of your internet bill, and you don't need to change your internet program. All you need to do is go to the website, which I'll put in the chat. And if you qualify, it's as simple as putting your information there and plugging that into your internet service provider's website for you to get that credit. So once again, it's called the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP. And the guidelines are either at or below 200% of federal poverty guidelines, or if you are currently receiving any sort of government assistance, federal government assistance, it's pretty exhaustive. So SNAP, Medicaid, federal housing assistance, SSI, women, infants, and children. I know a lot of people here in this community are of senior citizen age and might be receiving SSI. So a lot of those people might qualify for that. And it's very big. $30 off your internet bill is very big these days. So I'll put that in the chat as well. And finally, very important, very big. Thank you, Commissioner Gosselin, for bringing up the camera issue. We actually have a private security camera rebate program that's done through the DC government, administered by MPD. And what it does is, if you have a security camera, and the qualifications are pretty bare bones, so any sort of market security camera that you might think of, like Ring, one of those would qualify. And if you get one of those, you can get the money back, the rebate, as long as you register with MPD. Since it's registered with MPD, it's much easier for them to actually access the contents of the camera recordings if that's necessary. And with what we've heard is going on in the community, I think that's a very big thing for people here to know about. So I'll post that in the chat as well. And I recommend that if anyone has questions about any of these programs, that they come straight to me. And I can take any questions if there are any lingering questions.
Any questions for Amir? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Amir. Are there any community announcements from either Councilmember Che or Councilmember Lewis George's office? If so, please just raise your hand. Okay,
No hands raised.
you got one?
Nope, no hands.
Okay. Okay, so we can move on to our first presentation, and that's going to be led by Commissioners Gosselin and Speck. And this is a presentation with DDOT and the Maryland State Highway Administration on improving the pedestrian access to the Chevy Chase Circle. Peter, Randy, are you guys elevating who you need to? I don't have a list.
Yeah, I'm taking care of that, I think.
Okay.
Do you, Randy, do you see anybody from the National Park Service?
Yes, Nick Bartholomew is
Oh,
here.
Nick is here, okay, okay.
Yep.
Well, while you're elevating him, let me just set this up and then maybe turn to Ruth Robbins for a more thorough setup. Clearly, this Chevy Chase Circle and the Chevy Chase Fountain are sort of the visual center of our community and the link between the two Chevy Chases, DC, the real one, and Maryland. There have been a lot of change, a lot of improvement over the last several years, but those are really ramping up now. This summer is going to be a sad time because we're not going to be able to run the fountain, but that's because they're rebuilding the basin, all of the plumbing, and they're installing lights and doing a great deal of additional planting. So by next spring, this should be just a gorgeous and much more vibrant center to our community. The problem is that that's going to attract people to, it's not a problem, it's a good thing, it's going to attract residents and others to want to get to the circle. And that is a challenge. While I think that all of the agencies that have a stake in the decision-making here are broadly agreed we need to do something about it, because there are so many agencies, and that is the District Department of Transportation, the Maryland State Highway Department, and the National Park Service. I hope that by convening all of these people with Ruth Robbins, who is the president of the Friends of Chevy Chase Circle, we can get people on a schedule to get new crosswalks installed in time for the spring unveiling of all of these things. So with that, let me turn it over to Ruth to set this up. And then I think we really have quite a stellar cast here. I think I saw Director Lott. So we have all of the big three stakeholders in making decisions about this here tonight. So Ruth, do you have any introductory comments?
I hadn't expected to be a panelist, but I would like to thank everybody for being here. And I think it's great. We have precedent for coming together and solving problems on Chevy Chase Circle, and I'm delighted we have another opportunity to do it now. So I would like to hand it over to whomever would like to speak first. Is there someone, I don't know if we should start with the Park Service or with perhaps DDOT, who envisioned the initial plan. Derek, would you like to speak?
Is he there?
Commissioner, hi, this is Everett Lott with DDOT, and I can definitely get us started and turn it over to Derek, who has been working this plan for some time now. First, let me just say congratulations to Commissioner Gore for your elevation as becoming the new chair of ANC 34G. I'm really excited for you, and it's good to see all the commissioners. Seen many of you over the past summer and spring in person, and it's really good to see you all, and good to see you all here on video right now. As you know, we had done a study back in 2018 for the pedestrian crossing alternatives that looked at possible the crosswalks and pedestrian safety components at the Chevy Chase Circle. And so we have that presentation. We shared that presentation back in 2018. We indicated some of the possible locations of those crossings to the splitter islands, and like what a 5-year plan will look like. And so we're pretty much right on track with where we were expecting or anticipating being. And so we can kind of go through some of that now and talk about a little bit where we are and make sure that the things that we've been looking at are consistent and in line with the community and with the ANC. And so we don't really have a formal presentation to present, but we were just going to kind of talk through some of these things with you. And if that's okay, then I will go ahead and turn over to Derek, who can kind of begin the conversation and go from there.
Good.
Thanks, Director Lott. Good evening, everyone. For those that don't know, I'm Derek Voigt. I'm on the safety team at DDOT, and I've been engaged with both Ruth and Randy and other folks at the ANC since back in 2017 when I started at DDOT in this effort to kind of move Chevy Chase Circle forward. We were certainly pleased to deliver some pavement marking improvements probably about 2 years ago in coalition with our partners at SHA, working very closely. And those are out there in the circle now. And I know we've heard both positive and some mixed response concerning those. And as part of that effort, when we first undertook this, we talked about really 3 items. We talked about what we could do in the short term, and that was what we fielded most recently with the pavement markings. We talked about what was a midterm or maybe on the 5-year kind of timeline, and that was the relocation of the crossings. And then we talked about a longer timeline, which had to do with the curbs and some of the issues concerning drainage at the circle. And so just like we presented back in 2018, it will be logical to everybody here on the call that relocating the crossings to the circulatory roadways kind of makes sense just on the face of it. So when I say circulatory roadways, I mean the section of the circle that's between the northbound and southbound Connecticut Avenue approaches. So that's both on the north side and the south side of the circle. When we first undertook study at the circle back in 2017, one of the items that we looked at and then later presented on were the crossing options out there. In addition to kind of the logical piece, which is we have now reduced a lane within the circulatory roadway. So there used to be 3 lanes. They went down to 2 lanes. That was largely driven by the volumes that are using the Western Ave approaches to travel through the circle, southbound in the AM and then northbound in the PM. And so we needed to maintain at least 2 lanes there. We had originally hoped and modeled bringing that down to 1 lane. But the 2-lane cross-section out there with a reduced volume is substantially less, both from a cross-section standpoint on Connecticut Avenue. So the Connecticut Avenue sides are, of course, 3 lanes. The volume is significantly higher. So just on the face of it, the movement of the crossings to the circulatory lanes makes a lot of sense. However, the one major impediment, of course, construction on our side, both on the SHA side of the circle as well as on the DDOT side, notwithstanding, there is an internal network of paths within the park that would need to be realigned with where those crossing points come in. And so kind of in the intervening time and space, the Friends of Chevy Chase Circle were going to take that on with NPS. And, provided that we have a path forward with connecting those paths, the construction aspect is relatively straightforward. And so I think with that, we're open to hear updates on maybe what's happening inside the park. I did see that there was fencing up and heard just a minute ago that was relating to plumbing and lighting. But I am curious to learn if any progress has been, or if there's been any discussion about the relocation of the internal pathing to make those connections.
Could I just try to offer a 3rd grader's version of what you just said so ordinary people might understand it a little better? And Derek, correct me if I'm wrong. So as you come to the circle on Connecticut Avenue, whether you're coming in on Connecticut from Maryland or out from the district to Maryland, there turn out to be, just before you get to the circle, triangular islands that sit right there. And my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, that in the part of the circle, right at the wide end of that triangle in each case, you have 2 lanes of traffic. But on the east and west sides, because you've got some lanes that are feeding off to the side roads, you've got 3 lanes. Is that correct? Derek?
That's correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
Thank you for the breakdown.
And so my understanding is that your 2018 study, and then again, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was your 2018 study saw the safest place for pedestrians to get to the circle is from those triangular islands to the circle, because they only have to cross 2 lanes instead of 3 that are on the east and west sides of the circle. And because the sight lines, both for drivers coming at those pedestrians and for pedestrians seeing the vehicles, are longer as they come around, so that you would walk from a walkway on either side of Connecticut to this triangular island, and then you would walk from the triangular island to the circle. And I know there's a lot more to it than that, but was that basically the weight of your 2018 conclusion on this issue?
Correct. The 2018 study looked at both sight distance for approaching vehicles and found that those 2 crossings offered the greatest amount of sight distance. And then, of course, also from a volume standpoint, so the amount of vehicles, the potential exposure for the pedestrians as they're making that crossing movement, that's also lower there. So yes, the determination was short of signalization, that would be a better alternative than the existing connections.
And just so commissioners know and attendees know, right now, there are painted crosswalks kind of to the southeast and southwest, but you're zagging across 3 lanes of traffic to get there. So, you know, your opportunity to get nailed is higher. For pedestrians to get nailed. So maybe we ought to hear from Ruth. You tell me if you think this another approach, but should we hear from Maryland what they think of this idea?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Mogus, M.SHA District 3 Assistant District Engineer for Traffic. Can you hear me well? Just raise your hand. Okay, all right. So we are actively studying this Chevy Chase Circle right now for pedestrian mobility. We do understand that there are 2 existing crosswalks and there is a desire for a relocated or additional crosswalk on the north leg at the North Splitter Island, as was just articulated. So I don't want to jump ahead of the gun since we do have a study ongoing right now, but my personal concerns on behalf of the state of Maryland are more about pedestrian safety as far as sight distance for motorists that are traveling northbound approaching the Splitter Island, specifically on the innermost lane that would be proceeding, how do I say this, maintaining mobility within the circle, which is in direct conflict with the proposed crosswalk on that North Splitter Island. Those are the most direct concerns that I have that I want to see in the study to show that we're not degrading safety in the circle with that proposed movement. Additionally, there are some ancillary impacts that might affect beautification. Derek mentioned already the path inside the circle. Another would be ADA compliance, meaning detectable warning surface, ADA ramps, et cetera, and pedestrian signals, perhaps actuated inside the circle and on the Splitter Island. So there are a lot of things that go along with the proposed improvement, but we just need to wait and see what the study says. It is going to be forthcoming soon on our side from our consultant team.
Ruth, you want to say something to respond?
I had it. Thank you. I just had a question. Derek, you mentioned that the existing sidewalks are an impediment. So are you saying they can't be utilized, that we need to think in terms of new and different sidewalks?
Either sidewalks in the circle you're talking about.
In the circle, correct. So we have to have this crosswalk in, and certainly the Park Service will speak to this too, but you're saying that we cannot use the existing sidewalks that are within the circle?
So we would, this is all working from recollection. I'll take a look at this in a moment, but It's my recollection that on the pathing within the park was not readily was not in the configuration to accept the crossing. And I see Nick shaking his head there, and so I'll pull this up in just a moment so I can comment more specifically. But we of course would need that crosswalk to the point that Joe just raised. We would need that crosswalk to connect to a walkway in order for it to be an ADA compliant modification.
Okay, because there are existing sidewalks, but if we move them, and again, Nick will speak to this, that we're addressing, we need to go to the Commission of Fine Arts. Is that true, Nick? What?
I'm not sure that we would need to go to the Commission of Fine Arts. Good evening, everybody. I think that we certainly would need to go through approval of the State Historic Preservation, DC Historic Preservation Office and the Maryland Historic Preservation Office to look and see what these changes would mean to the historic landscape of the circle. But I think that we are open to possibilities and certainly are, look forward to what Maryland has to say with this study and looking more forward as well with DDOT to see how that southern alignment might come together. But, we understand the issues that are going to take place when the fountain is finished and more folks want to come into the circle. And we do want to improve safety in the area. So we're open to these suggestions, and we certainly will look forward to working with DDOT in Maryland as they bring the proposals forward.
Could I ask, just because, I mean, the snapping on of the fountain and the lights next spring kind of gives us a deadline. when Mr. Mogus, when you say you've got a study, when are you going to finish the study? And to Nick, just give me a guesstimate of what it would take going to these review boards. I mean, are we talking a month? Are we talking 6 months? Are we talking 6 years? I don't know. Mr. Mogus first, for Maryland.
Sure. I believe this request was initiated by Ms. Robbins. Is that right? Yes. I think it's about less than 30 days out until we should receive our study, and we will share the findings with the group, specifically with Ms. Robbins. She's the one that requested it.
Thank you.
So once we get the results of the study, we look at them in the Park Service and weigh them underneath the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. We do our compliance. That's our compliance process. And normally within the service itself, between the park and our regional office, that's a 60-day review period. And then once we look at that and make a determination about what to do, we engage with the DC Historic Preservation Office in this case, and give them our recommendations saying, well, yes, the National Park Service believes that this could be a certain effect on the historic environment that could be mitigated by certain activities. And so we'll go back and forth. So 90, 120 days once we have the actual proposals and can study them. So it's not 6 months. It's not 6 years. It's not a year. It's a relatively doable process within the next 5 months or so. So I can't give you a promise. There may be some impediments that we are not aware of, but we certainly will look at this as soon as it comes in and be able to make a determination relatively quickly.
Let me make a suggestion here. We're operating under a new regime with Chair Gore, and I have the impression, and I favor this altogether, that we're going to be on a tighter leash than we have been in the past. And so she wants me to start wrapping this up. I hear goodwill all around among all the agencies. I think that it would be useful for this commission to pass a resolution, which I just happen to have drafted, that just strongly urges the various parties to move expeditiously to an agreed upon solution that can be implemented by the spring of 2023. I can read the whole thing to you, or let's see, how can I put it on Well, let me just quickly read it. Unless somebody has an objection to trying to just, Michael.
I don't have an objection. I just think, one, we should see if any of the other commissioners have questions. And second, I think we should see whether anyone in the community, we've got 32 attendees on the call. If anyone of them have questions, I just think it's important that we not move by fiat and be more community involved. So that's sort of my preference. But the one question that I had two observations. One of the things that I notice in entering into the circle is that, one, of course, there's no stops, there's no traffic light on Connecticut Avenue from the Maryland entry into the circle. And that's the biggest danger point on the entire circle. And unless that's remedied, you're going to have speeding cars and accidents. That's where most of the near misses occur that I see. And I enter that circle almost every single day. Secondly, what I observe is that the traffic lights on Western traveling toward Oregon, and then the traffic light on Connecticut are timed so that when Western stops, Connecticut opens, and then vice versa. There's never a point in time where there are two red signals to allow people a chance to cross. They're always having to dodge one pack of moving cars, either the Western Avenue cars entering onto the circle or the northbound Connecticut Avenue. So one of the things that I think DDOT might want to look at is whether or not there should be some sort of delay where both of those traffic lights are on red to give people a chance to get across the street. We see that downtown sometimes where they're allowed to cross diagonally where all the lights are red at one point. And I think that might be worth looking into on Connecticut Avenue. But of course, nothing is going to change, Joseph, until Connecticut Avenue has a stoplight from southbound Connecticut Avenue, because those drivers drive the fastest and they are the least accommodating of any cars entering into the circle because they have nothing that slows them down.
Michael, southbound on Connecticut, there is a light right after the circle. I mean, as you come out.
As you come down Connecticut Avenue, when Maryland hits the circle, there's no traffic light there.
Oh, on the Maryland side.
On the Maryland side.
Oh, okay.
On the Maryland side. Maryland creates the biggest hazard in that circle because they have nothing that slows cars down that enter the circle coming from Connecticut Avenue southbound. That's the biggest danger point in the circle, because all the other entry points at least are dealing at some point with the stop lights that DC has on Western. There's no one on Western entering the circle going west, but because there's a stop at the northbound Connecticut, you tend to have an entry point. But if those two stoplights were red at the same time, then westbound cars on Western entering the circle would have a freer access to the circle, not have to try to dodge, between each pack of cars that's entering into the circle. If I'm making myself myself clear about that.
Yeah, let me go. Yeah, John, then Connie.
Yeah.
I'm totally at a loss for what's going on. And I don't want to extend this too much.
Yeah.
But I'd like to bring this into maybe real terms, direction-wise, since I've been going around that circle for 50 years. There are three major identifiable points: All Saints, Presbyterian, and Blessed Sacrament. If I'm standing in front of All Saints and I'm going to get there, it's going to be a two-step process. I can't walk across the street from All Saints and get to the circle.
That's right.
I'm going to have to go north or south. If I'm going north, I'm going to have to walk across Grafton. Then I'm going to have to walk across Connecticut to get to the island. And then I'm going to have to walk from the island to the circle. All of these, and if I'm standing between Western and Patterson in front of the Building of Blessed Sacrament, I'm going to have to go across Western, one step north, then across Connecticut to the island, and then from the island to the circle. These all seem like very convoluted routes. And because you've got Connecticut north and south, Western, east and west, and Grafton and Patterson, you've got 6 or 7 points of departure. And I'm having a hard time figuring out how we get there from here.
Can I just say in response to that 2 things? One is that all of the transit you just talked about are 2-lane versus 3 as it now exists. And secondly, we're not traffic engineers. I mean, I think the way to resolve this is not to try to up the ante and say we're going to have a light, and nor is it to try to solve the problem for DDOT or the Maryland Highway Administration, but to encourage them to get to a solution they all agree to, and the Friends of Chevy Chase Circle agree to, and the National Park agree to, and move it along. Otherwise, we're going to surely have problems, because the walkways now marked on that circle cross 3 lanes, and they're kind of diagonal cut from southeast and southwest. So Connie?
Right, but Peter, unless you have traffic lights that stop cars at all times, it doesn't matter how many lanes you're crossing, you're crossing a very dangerous intersection.
But traffic lights are going to be, if we wait for traffic lights, we're going to have somebody run over in the interim. I mean, if we could leave the lights in the fountain off next spring, and we would encourage it.
We have 2 traffic lights. The traffic light that's missing is Maryland.
Okay. Connie?
Well, I will have to agree that I think that that intersection, or that kind of like merging of traffic where people are trying to get south or north, is pretty dangerous for pedestrians. And it's a real lost opportunity for our community not to be able to use this fountain. So I have 2 questions. One is has there been any consideration of raising the cross, meaning for pedestrians not to be in contact with vehicles, but rather to have a way to get to the circle that's like a raised crosswalk? If that's been considered, I'd like to know why it's not on the table as an option. And then number 2, Jimmy Butler has a question, which was my question. Are there other circles in the city with somewhat similar traffic and park features that might help us think about this? What about Logan Circle? Well, my question is, what about DuPont Circle? They have a very wide, that circle, and there's a lot of cars that go around. However, it's pretty safe. I mean, as a pedestrian, I find walking there fine. It's not a problem. So what is different about our Chevy Chase Circle versus DuPont Circle? And has there been a consideration of making sure that, sort of like what Michael was saying, like just how do we keep pedestrians safe so we could use it? I'd love to bring little kids there, play in the circle. It'd be great, but I don't want to cross it right now. It's scary.
Peter, do you want to take that question real
No,
quickly?
no, I don't want Peter. This is not directed to Peter. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not directed to Peter. Sorry,
Yeah.
this is directed to one of those experts,
I agree.
Joseph or Derek or someone, but not Peter or us. I mean,
Sure.
you guys.
Sure, and perhaps the very obvious difference between DuPont and Chevy Chase is signalization, right? So we have 6 to 8 signalized nodes within DuPont Circle, which help provide safe passage to the interior as well as kind of organize the traffic flows. As part of the 2018 study, we proposed signalization here. It was simple 2-phase signalization on the Western Ave approaches. That's not a new proposal. That's one that DDOT has made, originally made in 2000, made again in 2011. I might be slightly off on the years. It was made again in 2013, only to be met with strong resistance from both communities in Maryland as well as in DC. So We do have a relatively straightforward signalization plan that we have proposed in the past. From an operational standpoint, we believe that the operations are adequate for the vehicles under that signalization plan. Now, I will say in fairness to Joseph, he was not party to that proposal when it came out in 2018. So of course, I don't want to speak for him, but SHA was previously on board with that under the previous leadership. So
I'm sorry, Derek, the signalization
and-
would be 4 signals. You'd be adding one on each western and one on each Connecticut, north, south Connecticut, east, west, western.
So the signalization plan is a simple 2-phase signal. So what that means is one street goes and then the other on the Western Avenue approaches. And so what that would do is that would provide a phase for the existing crosswalks at Western Avenue to get folks across to the center while the Western Avenue approach was being served. And then it would switch over to the Connecticut Avenue approach and serve that and take down the crosswalk, obviously, because that would be a conflicting movement at that point. So it's a simple signalization plan. Now, I think in fairness to Nick, MPS has some concerns about it because it will require some work against the interior of the circle. Of course, we have some very large old trees there. And so this is not an easy plan, but it is a simple plan. Let me say that.
And Derek, it's also the safest plan or the safest treatment for pedestrians and for those yield concerns.
Absolutely. This is a simple configuration that motorists are accustomed to. We're deconflicting 2 flows and providing a full traffic signal for pedestrian passage. And so that's kind of our highest bar, and one that, that we obviously use around the city and other circles like this.
Can I suggest we hear from Mr. Mogus on this, if he has anything to say, and then Ruth, and then I suggest to the commissioners that one way we could look at this is that either the 3 major agencies, the NPS, DDOT, and Maryland, come to us with a proposal of we see the crosswalk idea as an easily and immediately implementable one that does not require us to rule out signalization, or the 3 agencies come to us and say, we can do signalization before the spring of 2023. But I'm concerned that that we be casual about rolling into 2023 and putting up all these attractants for people and not giving them a way to get there. And so I think that probably just doing after we hear from Mr. Mogus and Ruth, we either consider this resolution or not, to just encourage people to come together quickly to do something, these key agencies, or we move on and we take this up again. Does that seem reasonable to commissioners?
Yeah. Can we, Mr. Mogus, can you comment on the signalization plan? Is that in the current plan that Maryland is working on?
No. Derek, did you want to add something before I hop on?
Yeah, I just wanted to set some expectations surrounding signalization. I can certainly share the documentation with Joseph for his review that we previously proposed. But I do just want to jump in and set expectations to say that there are under no circumstances that this would be resolved by the 2023 date. The signalization will require a capital project because of some sub-base issues and some apron construction that needs to happen. So it is a long-term project. It is not a near-term one.
I'm kind of in listening mode and I want to see what there is a general consensus of, but I was going to put some water on the fire, but Derek kind of beat me to it. There's a whole slew of things that have to happen before signal construction actually happens. I mean, there are very basic things like utility relocation. Somebody has to do site visits to assess what can and can't be done, what's feasible, what's not. Then you start working with your concept design and development. We have 3 agencies that need to come to an agreement contractually, design, coordination, outreach. I mean, this is not something you fast track in 12 months, let alone, 16 months or 18 months. So I'm not writing off anything. We have our study going on right now. I'm happy to hear everyone's interest, their feedback, their concerns. I need everybody to understand the scope of what's being discussed right now versus a relocated crosswalk. So, thank you.
Ruth, do you have?
No, I just want to underscore what Peter said, that I am really looking for just, I think we need an interim solution. And signalization is not off the table by any means. Perhaps it's the ideal. Even what Connie spoke of some sort of overpass to the circle, wouldn't that be fabulous? But we're not there yet. And in the meanwhile, we're obligated, since we know the safest way onto the circle is from the traffic splitter, I feel we're obligated to go ahead and put that crosswalk in as soon as possible.
Lisa, do you want to take community comments, and do you want to go for the resolution, or just put that aside until next meeting?
I definitely would like to take community comments. If anyone has any comments that you want to chime in on, please raise your hand. We can let the community comment on this. Peter, I will, let you do it. I have no problem with the resolution. It's just urging the agencies to work together as fast as possible on an interim solution. You can, if you want, there's no community comment. So if you want, you can make a motion. We can always send the language around to the commission for approval post-meeting.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be exact. And we can do it that way if that's what you like to do.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think just so that the commissioners don't feel sideswiped by this, 2 weeks till our next meeting, let's just take this up at the next meeting and, mull the stuff we've just talked about. I'd say to the three agencies that are here, we do think that you guys are the experts, and we understand that these are complicated issues, but we do hope that we can come to a smart interim solution, and we urge you to work in that direction so we don't end up with problems when we should be having this great moment when the circle is reborn, when there are lights to greet people, when there's a fountain that finally works again and stays working. We don't want to have tragedy mar it. So let's put it off until next time. We've got another big issue to take up. So.
That sounds good.
Thank you all for coming. Very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next topic is a big one as well. Discussion with, is the deputy mayor in attendance or someone from his
Yes.
staff, Peter?
Yes,
Okay.
he is there. Yes,
Okay,
I'll
so
elevate him in just one.
Okay. And I know Lieutenant Olivierre is here as well, but this next
Right.
discussion is public safety regarding our apartment community along Connecticut Avenue. And that has been a source of discussion for a long time. Peter, I'll let you, obviously set this up, but, just to make folks aware, it's definitely been a conversation that's been ongoing. We've had a number of incidents along Connecticut Avenue, some of them very tragic. I know I've talked to quite a few folks about this, including the lieutenant. So I'm very excited to hear what's going on from the deputy mayor and the lieutenant and how we can, kind of help get these issues addressed.
Great.
So Peter, you want to lead into this?
Let me first say we're honored to have the Deputy Mayor, Chris Geldart, here, and of course, Lieutenant Olivierre, who's been a huge help in this issue. We understand that the problems we've seen so far in our area aren't as florid or as tragic as the one we've seen in just this spring and winter. A little further down the avenue, the January 27th Days Inn shooting, in which one person died, the April 21st Connecticut House assault, in which a woman was bound and thrown out of an 8-story window.
She jumped. She wasn't thrown. She jumped.
Okay, she jumped, and of course the shooter off the 4100 block of Connecticut. And in addition, we have heard a great deal from the police about nuisance buildings up and down the avenue, and nuisance seems like a word that understates what some of these problems are. We would like to get ahead of this before we have a tragedy here. And my great hope for this evening is that with the help of the deputy mayor and with the guidance of the lieutenant and with input from apartment dwellers, some of whom I see in attendance, we can start building a strategy for how we get the right people together, talking to the building owners and the building managers about what their rights are and what their obligations are, to do vetting and what their rights are and what their obligations are when they face these problems. Because this is nitty gritty. Trying to put some big solution from top down isn't going to work. We need to get into these buildings and get people understanding what the rules are. With that, I think that the person who can get the overview for the immediate neighborhood would be the lieutenant. And then Deputy Mayor will have you respond and give us some suggestions about how you think we ought to approach this. Lieutenant, you're muted.
Afternoon, everyone. Or should I say good evening? Yes, we've been dealing with the apartments for ever since I got here 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And it's unfortunate that we have to come to this where we have to sit down and have a meeting to address some of the issues. When I first got to Tootie and took over PSA 201, I believe it's the Kenmores. I had a family who moved out because people were smoking marijuana in the hallway and the stairwells and stuff like that. I understand that marijuana is not a possession of marijuana. It's not, should I say, not a crime anymore. However, smoking in the hallways of the buildings and the stairways and stuff is considered basically public smoking, and that's arrestable and that's finable. But by the time we get there, we don't see the subjects anymore. However, this is not about moving anybody out of these residents. It's not about that. I'll go back to what you said, Commissioner Gosselin. This is about having people understand what their responsibilities are now. One of the things I talked about with you, Commissioner, is that, excuse me. I'm sorry, everyone. I do these to fulfill here, but yeah, one of the things we talked about is having people understand the requirements, for the building managers, the building owners, the apartment, whatever security and stuff is having the tenants and everyone get on the same page and understand what their responsibility requirements of the neighborhood and how they, expected to live in the neighborhood so that everyone can live in peace and still, get along harmoniously. So that's the biggest things. I think that the management, the city, the commissioners and everyone, they should and the residents should have a meeting with the series of meetings with the residents that are in there, and like you said, explain to them their rights, what they can do, what they can't do, as tenants in the building. And I think that would be very helpful in this case. And again, this is not about moving anybody out. This is just about trying to get everyone to get along. We have seen, like you said, have been some disorderly stuff that's just been happening over and over. It's getting too frequent. We're starting to get an uptick in certain crimes in the PSA, and we're trying to address that. And I'm not saying it's anybody, from here, because it's people that are coming from other districts, they're coming from Montgomery County, Maryland, and committing crime. But if we could get the neighborhood, the community to be on board, some of this stuff can actually, if they're helping, if everybody's living, again, peacefully and getting along, some of this stuff could be avoided.
Lieutenant, in addition to residents, would it be helpful to meet with managers and owners of buildings
Yes, yes. I think it would be helpful that the managers, the owners, the city should also get involved.
Well, speaking of that, and how should the city get involved?
To come and bring the programs, let the managers know and the owners and stuff know what their rights are as legally, one, what they can and can't do, what programs they have, all the programs, lay everything out on the table, and then we meet with the community as well.
Yeah. Just to set up for the deputy mayor, many of the problems that the lieutenant talks about are lower level. I mean, but we've had some doozies here. On January 19th, MPD and ATF arrested somebody at the Kenmore on a first-degree murder charge, and I think three or four prior warrants on firearms. During the arrest, live firearms were thrown out the window and discharged about 300 feet, 400 feet from my house. So I have a vested interest. So these, in addition, again, at the Kenmore, there's a drug delivery service that advertises online. So we have not had the tragedies yet of Van Ness, but we need to find ways to do something now before we get there. Is it fair to turn the mic over to the deputy mayor, lieutenant, or do you have other things to say?
Well, yes, I wish the deputy mayor could take some of these concerns and we all could sit down and have a serious meeting, about these issues. These are quality of life issues I'm talking about. And this is how things actually start, because build upon, just like the fires that we've been having. Person started off burning trash cans, then he went to dumpsters, then he went to sheds and then garages.
Mm-hmm.
I believe his next step would have been an actual home. Because it starts off small, and if you leave a problem to fester, it just grows into something bigger and sometimes uncontrollable. So yes, I think the deputy mayor
Mr. Geldart?
could have a big input on this as well.
Can you make, so to you, sir, do you have advice for us about how we can usefully intervene here to make a difference before we have more problems?
It goes back to what I'm saying.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. You had a question. I'm gonna mute my mic now.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you all for having me here tonight. Happy to talk about this. Happy to work with you all. I had a very similar conversation with ANC 3F in their area on what they're seeing in some of their buildings there. I can tell you that I have probably now at this point been in 20 to 25 different buildings across the city in every ward where we've seen issues like this. Some of them a little bit more extreme, some of them about the same. I've met with building owners, management companies, residents, neighbors on the issues that we're seeing. And there's a lot of similarities across the board. And there's some cases that are, again, like I said, more extreme. Some places where we have things like squatters coming into open apartments. No, those are not in 3 or 4. No, not in 3. In 4, we had some of that in that ward. We had some of that. And there's a lot of different issues around it, a lot of different root causes around what we're seeing, not only in the apartments, but in our crime numbers in the city right now. Our violent crime, though our homicide numbers in certain areas of the city remain high, our violent crime numbers have come down significantly since February. We were up 28% in violent crime. That's many different types of crimes in the city in February going into March. And we've managed, working MPD and the chief and the lieutenant and all of MPD have done a great job at how the different ways in which we can address the different types of violent crime. We've reduced that we're down to 8% as of this week increase, and that's coming down even more. So that's all good signs. However, I completely understand, like I said, having been in many of these apartment buildings throughout the city, the issues in which you're talking about. Some of them have to do with how we're doing vouchers throughout the city. That program of doing housing vouchers for folks in the city, there are multiple programs of that. Some the federal government uses, some the local government, DC government uses. There's a lot of misnomer around what happens with that. And having met with a lot of the owners of buildings, they're just as frustrated as those that are living or neighbors to some of the buildings. So we have a task force that's working on that. And I know that you're asking for a granular level here, but I wanted to make sure I covered what we're doing at a larger spectrum as well. We brought together a task force that I started with the human service agencies, as well as the public safety agencies, particularly MPD, to look at how are we doing the programs that we do and what do we need to do to improve those, so we reduce the amount of calls for service and the crime and the things that we're seeing in some of these buildings. And that task force continues, and that includes, the housing authority, as well as the human service agencies and public safety agencies. So that's continuing on how to improve those programs. But to get to your particular point, first I want to say I would love to take a walk through these buildings with any of the commissioners that want to take a walk with me through them. And I can do that as soon as anybody is willing to do it with me. We'll make the time to do that walk. The lieutenant's correct. Smoking marijuana, I mean, if that's what it is, that's pretty light on it. We've had apartment buildings where we've had much heavier drug use in the hallways, and that spills out into the streets in front of the buildings, even in certain areas of the city. And that's something that we've been working very closely with building management, building ownership, MPD, as well as some of the SPOs or special police officers that management and building owners can bring around to help reduce that. When you have somebody paying attention that is wearing a uniform around a building, that deters a lot of that activity that goes on, especially if they're present more than not. So that's something that I've seen be very effective in certain areas. But that is a building owner and management decision that can be driven by, the residents within the buildings, and that's one way that we've seen successes in some areas. Again, glad to walk through them to see the particular issues. But the lieutenant mentioned earlier, I want to make sure people understand this. While smoking marijuana in a hallway is considered public space and is illegal, and people can be charged for that, there's very little desire from our prosecutors, particularly the U.S. Attorney's Office, to prosecute any of those cases. It's just not something that they're willing to take up and move forward. So in many of those instances, at best case, you're doing a misdemeanor where they're getting a fine. And in many cases, those fines either don't get paid or, it doesn't deter the activity. So that's an area that the chief, myself, and others are taking a look at. What can we do in those areas that make it, and, presence is a big one. So that's something that I can talk with the 2D commander about, making sure we have adequate presence in some areas. Now, that's not going to stop it altogether, but it does make it harder and makes it less palatable for folks. Now, when you're talking about the inside of buildings, that becomes a little bit tougher. That's private property. We need to have a call for service for there. MPD is not just going to walk through apartment buildings. We don't have the resources or manpower to just do that every day. However, there are conversations that we can have with management companies and the owners about how they can do better at providing the deterrence inside the buildings. What we found is putting cameras up is good to see what happened after the fact. It doesn't help in deterrence, to be quite honest. There needs to be a presence in there. And that can be a management presence. It could be a special police officer presence, security guard presence, whatever that may be. And banning people who don't belong in the building, that are in there doing activities that they shouldn't be doing. But those are all conversations to have with management and building owners, and be glad, again, to come out and walk through with you and meet with the owners and meet with the management companies and talk through that stuff with you. That's really where, to be quite honest, the options in here, really, that's where it lies. They need to have more of a security presence in whatever shape or form that may be, inside the buildings, and they need to have the capacity to be able to ban people from coming into the facilities and enforce that. That's where we've seen the most effect in any of the apartments or buildings that I've gone through. And I'll stop right there because I know there's probably a lot of questions and we can keep going with the conversation.
Lisa, did you were the first with your hand up? What do you have?
John was first.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. You covered them actually to some degree, so I'll try to be brief. But for Mr. Geldart, do you find that property owners and managers are generally unaware of their responsibilities, or unaware of their capabilities, or unaware of resources they can use to prevent this kind of behavior? Is there a big education challenge out there for either our ANC or for your department or for the city as a whole?
I have not seen in all, and again, I haven't been to all the apartments in the city, of course, but I've been to, like I said, about 25 of them. And where we see issues like this that have been raised, either by law enforcement or by the occupants, other people that are living there, to management, they know what's going on. And in many cases, management and ownership know what's going on. In some cases, there may not be the resources in which to really put a fix in. They may not, some of the places that they, many.
Hold on, you're freezing.
The owners, their residents in their apartment, and do want. Was that me that froze up?
Yeah, you're freezing up, Mr. Geldart. Can you fiddle with your computer connection?
Or maybe take off.
Let me see if I turn my video off.
Yeah, take off your video.
Yeah.
Did that make it better?
Yeah.
Okay.
John, did you have another question?
Briefly, two questions. I was struck by the lieutenant's comment about little stuff eventually turning into big stuff. And they've been trying to, if you don't get the small stuff, it can elevate to larger concerns. That may be, at the prosecutor level, in which your hands are tied a little bit, but that's a concern. I don't know how you address that, but maybe you have some solutions. In terms of the resources for the managers, if the police don't have the personnel, obviously, to intensify their patrols inside buildings or whatever, is there some way that the property owners could be incentivized to intensify their own employment of private security people? Maybe some kind of a property tax break from the city, or some other kind of incentive that would beef up the presence of security people on the premises, private security. Is that something that an ANC could get involved in to think about?
Have we lost?
I think. Is mine still working?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on back. Yep.
Okay. My apologies. What we found is in areas where we have folks that may be on voucher programs, that may be the source of some of the issue. that the voucher program itself provides for more than can provide for more than market value. And in some cases where the for security is within that increased voucher amount for the areas. Now, in many of those places, it's not enough. In some of the areas, I can tell you about an area in Ward 4 where we have multiple buildings on one street where we have a lot of voucher holders. Security costs that the owner has taken on and the management company has taken on to keep to ensure that there's not a lot of illegal activity far exceeds the amount that they can get through the voucher program. Now they're willing to do that because they're vested in ensuring that people have good places to live. That's a different type of organization that does that. I do think that they can, you all and we all, I even live in an apartment building. We all have seen increases in rent and things like that. I think that the need for security does rest on the owners of the property, the management company of the property, to ensure that they adequately put the right security in their facilities. In some places, that's just a person in front. When you come in, you have to go past the security and you have to have a reason for being in the apartment. In some places, there's a lot of folks that come and go in apartments, and you need the ability to ban people and ensure that you're not letting folks in that have created problems in the building before. So I do think that it is an owner and management issue.
Lisa, or?
A couple things I wanted to ask about. Deputy Mayor Geldart, can you tell me a little bit more about the task force that you guys have in place? Who sits on the task force? What's their overall mission? Are they going to be making task force recommendations? If so, when are they coming out? Can you give me a little bit more background about this task force?
Sure. And the word task force was just the name that we put on it. These are executive agencies, Department of Human Services, Department of Behavioral Health. We have the Housing Authority. We have MPD, my office, the City Administrator's office, as the City Administrator chairs it. Just several agencies, all the agencies that would be involved in ensuring that our programs in the city that go towards housing have the right practices, the right funding, and we have the issues that we're seeing identified so that as the programs move forward, they're supported appropriately so that we can do our part in ensuring that we have the right resources in the apartments and in the buildings throughout the city as we do our voucher programs and housing programs. So it's really just executive department agencies. And it's more of a task force's, recommendations are not what we're looking for in the task force. We're looking for actions and what we're going to do and then executing those things. So it's really ensuring that how our programs are being executed are done appropriately. And we're sharing information across the public safety agencies to the human service agencies and likewise to ensure that we are being most efficient and effective as the executive agencies out there doing our housing programs.
Okay. And what actions are you guys in a recommendation or action implementation phase now? I'm just looking for what actions has the task force recommended to take specifically regarding this particular issue. And that's whether it's throughout the city or if it's focused on Connecticut Avenue. I don't know if you all are that granular, but it obviously seems to be an issue, that's happening across the city. I know with Connecticut Avenue, just working with MPD myself, and being involved in some of these issues, the call times and responses that MPD is directing to these efforts are greatly increasing. So what have they recommended in terms of specific actions to take? The other question that I'm really interested in too, and maybe more so even than that one, is I've been for a long time trying to understand what agencies I'm dealing with when it comes to these issues on Connecticut Avenue. So I know there are voucher holders in there from the Housing Authority, and I'm pretty familiar with those rules and requirements. And maintaining a safe environment is paramount, especially when you're getting federal funding. But what other city agencies are we talking about when it comes to the population there? And I'm really interested in what those operating agreements state and require management agents and owners to do.
Okay, so on the task force, the work group that we brought together, it's about, I want to say it's 2 months old from its initiating. A couple things we needed to, understand just what you asked, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does this work across? Because it's not very clear. DC government is not the only ones that issue vouchers in the city. So the Veterans Administration does as well. And there's one other federal entity that does as well. As far as DC government is concerned, all the vouchers come through the Housing Authority. However, not the Housing Authority doesn't grant those vouchers. It could be the Department of Human Services. It could be the Department of Health. There's a lot of different entities that are able to use the voucher program for people in need. So when we brought the group together, the first thing was, okay, who's giving out vouchers for what? What are the programs and what are the supports and services that go to each of those programs?
Right.
Because that's where the real rubber meets the road.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Is already providing? How often are we checking on the folks that are in our programs? How effective is that being? Are we using community-based organizations to do those things? How well are they doing their job? All of those were the initial questions that were laid out on the table. And all of those are ones we're following up on right now to determine exactly how well the whole process is working that we have control on. And then, looking at the veteran side of things, there's some things we can do there working with the Veterans Administration, but that is a tough nut for us to crack in there. They've got a lot of rules and requirements around their stuff. And it's extremely hard once you have a veteran placed in a housing unit to do anything with that. So that's really what we're looking at. And then to your second part of the question, I believe if I have it correctly, I'm trying to make sure I cover the question appropriately. When we work with the building owners and management companies that are managing these, how well are we working with them? If we have an apartment building that has 100 units in the apartment building, 2 of those are voucher units, then the question is, how well are we getting connected to those people that are there? That's not going to be any on-site or resident services. That's going to be people that are going to come in and check on folks. And then how well are we working with the management company to understand when there's issues, and are they connecting to us when they start to see issues so that we can be prompt in our response to those. To keep that from being the public safety guy here and my role in this, I want to lower the amount of responses that we have to do to these buildings, because that does take away from the rest of the city and for the rest of the second district from being able to respond to everything else that's going on. So that's really my concern in this, is how do I make sure that we have the right services there, doing the right things for the people, so I don't have to send NPD or I don't have to send FEMS into the apartments to deal with issues that should be being dealt with the case managers and the management companies working better together. So that's really from my perspective to get to, and then from the human services perspective and Housing Authority, it's working all of those connections. And that's the city administrator's role there, to make sure that the programs are being efficiently run, effectively run, and all of that.
Okay, I might have other questions. Connie?
I think there are some questions in the chat that maybe we need to get to, but I did want to bring something up, which is Deputy Mayor Geldart, you talked about, being able to ban certain people from coming into a building. I think that there's a lack of maybe data and understanding whether or not certain kind of unsavory activities are committed by voucher recipients or by friends who are coming over or people who are not necessarily in the neighborhood coming over. And I think that gets really confused in the news. It's like the report out isn't very clear. And I really don't like having that kind of connection always, like there's a voucher recipient and therefore there's more crime, because we just don't know really what's happening. So I'd like to know, right? I mean, I'd like to know, is the district collecting data? Is that data made public? What are the actions that are being taken so that residents know that you're doing a lot of work and you're trying, right? But the problem is actually so tied together, which is like incentives for the building owners, who are collecting, pretty, higher than market rate rents, for them to be able to provide certain services, because if it drives out other people who've been there long term, they can just rent out those buildings to again and collect, higher rent, because a lot of the rent along Connecticut Avenue is naturally affordable, right? It's naturally occurring affordable. So I think the incentive system is skewed. I think that the program is good. We want to house people, especially if they're low income and they need housing. But I think that when things get reported, it's so confusing. Even in this chat today about the woman who either she jumped out, pushed out. I mean, once incorrect information is out there, it's very hard to correct it. So therefore the government, if you collected that information, it were public, then you're the authority. You're collecting it, you're checking to make sure it's right. And I think that it's important to unpack all of this, and I'm just saying this to say, what are we doing for that, to make sure that no one has the wrong impression and that the facts are laid bare?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Commissioner, I can agree with you more, that's exactly what we're trying to do. I can tell you though, not being a human service person or a housing person, being a public safety person, a lot of our public safety data is publicly available. What I found when we first started this is the Fair Housing Act came down on top of me very hard and very fast when I was trying to figure out, all right, well, how many vouchers do we have in this area of the city? So the Fair Housing Act comes down and says, we can't tell you that. And I was like, okay, it's not publicly available, but how do we work the programs through? So I know here is a building. This building has this many vouchers inside of it. Those vouchers actually came from these entities that, are supposed to provide these services based on the programs that they oversee. In what we're doing in this work group, this task force that we have together that is trying to put the solutions in place for this to make all of this work better, is how do we share that information? What is the type of information that can be shared? Just amongst the government agencies, let alone making it public. So I don't know how we get to what gets released publicly on this, because again, we're about 2.5 months into this, and we're just now cracking that nut of we need to share the information internally on the programs, so that we can improve the programs themselves. So to get to a public release of that is a little bit difficult. And I don't know if I answered all your questions in there, but where we are right now, that Fair Housing Act got thrown at me probably about 10 times as I started this process. And many of you may not know me. I've been in the city for a couple of almost 2 decades now, working on public safety issues, homeland security issues, emergency management issues. There's a lot of areas where we need to do better, and we need to be able to share information, share practices and things like that. And, when somebody starts to quote to me a Fair Housing Act, I say, okay, what are we hiding? And we're not really hiding anything, but why can't we share the information? How do we do that to make our programs better? Because there's always a way. And that's what we're working on now. And I would foresee in the future, much of the information, maybe not the exact information on who or what apartment and where, but we will see more of the data of what is the issues and how are those issues being dealt with appropriately or inappropriately. Are we getting better or are we not getting better? I think we'll see a lot of that.
Thank you so much for your answer. And I would say one more thing. I know that others have their hands up, but one more thing is you made a point earlier about having a security guard at the door to either let people in or not let people in. I found that there are buildings, apartment buildings with front desks. And when you have someone at the front desk, you kind of know who's there. They know more. They're sort of like the central agents, right? Versus tenants who are in their own home and not necessarily knowing what's going on. I wonder if the city could require something like that for buildings with more residents, so that I don't know what the rules are, but I'm just bringing that forward. If there's no security guard per se, but a front desk, but at least a front desk, they can, with one of the security, whatever those things are called, the fobs, right? Key fobs. Then you have a little bit more control. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Lieutenant?
Yeah, the deputy mayor touched on something there about interagency information. That is one of the most convoluted stuff to go through when you have time sensitive. You need time sensitive information to get on top of certain situations. How can we make this easy? Because after hours, it's impossible to get any information. If the management is closed or no one's there in the building to say who live here, and God forbid we have a homicide or something, we don't know. We can't identify the person. We can't do nothing because we can't get the information. That's just an example I'm throwing out there. Another example, like dealing with child and family. After hours, if there's no, we end up turning into babysitters sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they don't have the manpower is what they say, or they have us there and they don't want to take the kids when we can't find a family. And we just can't log into their database and get information that we'll need to, conduct our job in a more efficient way. So it's very frustrating sometimes. And how can we get, we work for the same government. How can we get all the government together, passing information? I'm not saying we need as a police department. I'm not saying that we need every information, we just need certain information about people in situations that we need to deal with. So how can we get the, DC government agencies that belong to the same government working together to pass information more efficiently so that we can go about a business, of public safety?
The lieutenant just hit on exactly the point of what we're really trying to do with the task force of agencies that we're bringing together. We got to be able to share the information. We may not be able to share who per se, a voucher holder or whatever it may be inside the building, but we can say the fact that in apartment 307 is a voucher facility, and that voucher came from this agency. That tells MPD what they need to know, because if they know that that's a mental health consumer, they know how to handle that when they get to the building. And I will give an exact example of this. Street, probably 6-8 months ago, somebody from the building across the way call into 911, said they saw somebody on a balcony with a long gun, with a rifle. MPD responds, they take a look, they get an idea what apartment it is. They go over to the door, they knock on the door. Person comes out to the door, screams and yells at MPD, goes back inside, comes out again, screams and yells at MPD, goes back inside, comes out a third time with a gun in hand, and ends up getting, start to raise the weapon at MPD. And, the officers responded and unfortunately killed the suspect because he was about to, they felt he was about to do the same. And, after the fact, turns out, this is a mental health consumer that we had been to their apartment before, but that information wasn't readily available. And that's really what we're trying to do here is how do we share the information so there's more resources at the hands of the officers as they come in, or really the end goal is to make it so that the officers don't have to come, so that we can send the appropriate social work or mental health entity to work the problem instead of having to send the Metropolitan Police Department every time.
Let me ask this: do you guys have like a and I know the task force is working on this, but like memorandum of understanding? I mean, where there's information sharing agreements? Because I'm listening at this, and then I'm kind of thinking of the federal task force environment where you have multiple agencies. Where I mean, that is a horrible scenario that you just described. That nobody wants to, you know, that's just awful. There has to be some kind of way that on the city level, just like the lieutenant mentioned, there has to be this way of information sharing. And I don't know how you guys get there in terms of the city, if there's MOUs that you can do amongst the agencies, as opposed to an executive level task force. Maybe this needs to be more of an operational task force. But I really hope you guys, I just implore you guys to work on this urgently and quickly, because that's something we don't ever want to have, have to happen in this city. And they need to have the information that they need to have to be as effective as they can be.
Yeah. Trust me, Councilman, or excuse me.
Okay,
I'm not forecasting. I'm not forecasting. I was out with a bunch of councilmen earlier. But if I did forecast, congratulations. But no, I was at the scene at V Street. I've been out to the apartment. Like I said, I've been going to all the apartments where we know we're having issues and all of that, because I'm the type of person, I have to see it. I have to feel it. I have to understand it. I have to ask questions. I have to talk to, voucher holders. I have to talk to management company people. I have to talk to building owners, and they're all across the spectrum. Some of them, want help. Some of them are really taking it on seriously. Some of them are not. I mean, it's just, it is, you get that whole mix across the board. But I can tell you, urgency is the 100% reason why I went to the city administrator, went to the mayor, and I said, we need to get a group working on this. And the mayor wholeheartedly agreed. Look, the mayor's about housing our residents. And she's about housing our residents in a way where we're not concentrating poverty in the city.
Right.
And that's really what we need to be doing. But to do it, we got to do it right. And I think it moved so fast to do it and then COVID happened as well. That became a partial factor in this, because when you have social workers and you have case managers and people like that need to be doing, once a week, twice a month, depending on, the level of the person and the things that are going on, in-person visits to see what's going on inside the department. Are they taking care of themselves? Are they taking care of the department? Are they doing the right things? How they're working with them. They do that in person and they went to virtual. That created a problem for us. And we're seeing the output of that problem now. And really, to not to restate everything I said, that's the work we got right now. How do we make sure we get back into where we need to be? We're doing the right checks. We've got the right services going on for the people that are out there so that these things work appropriately. And as far as the memorandums of understanding and the data sharing agreements and things like that, my first thing in all that is to say, we're all working in this together. I don't need a data sharing agreement. I need you to sit across the table from me and tell me what I need to know so I can tell you what you need to know so we can get the job done, right? And in many cases that works. In some cases,
what legal is going to tell you.
In some cases,
Look,
in some cases, the lawyer's getting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can I cut in here and just say a couple of things? Number one, I sympathize with both you and with the lieutenant about the job you face. Number two, I think the way we ought to think about this is addressing Connie's point, is not necessary. Take a broader notion. We're trying to be sure there are ways to cope with people who are threatening the safety of living in apartment buildings or public safety, whether they be voucher tenants or not. I want to come back to what I think we can do. I mean, I understand that there's this need to make the city work at the city level, but we've got a problem in this community. And it sounds to me as if the way around, not around, I mean, I'm duplicitous, but the way around the Fair Housing Act is to talk to building managers and owners about their relationship to tenants, and then their relationship to the various services, not just the police, but behavioral health, DHS, community development housing, housing authority, so that when they have a problem, they can't be totally restricted from, knowing about the problem because it's right in their lap. And so basic question for you is, how do we get building managers to come? I'm happy to walk around with you, and I'm sure Commissioner Chang and Commissioner Gore and others of us would be too. But we need to do something more organized than that. I mean, just sort of doing a pep rally for building managers and owners isn't going to do it. It's just not going to cut it. How do we get building managers and owners to come? Could the city consider making it a requirement of taking various vouchers that building managers and owners make themselves available for meeting with city officials on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis? Two, even before we get to that, is there a way that you could suggest, Mr. Geldart, to get a group of people, a group of managers together in at least our big buildings in our neighborhood, our big apartment buildings along Connecticut for a starter? And then is there a way for you, using your task force, to get the right service agencies to come? I mean, in the ideal, what you could imagine is these building managers having an emergency call list, and it ain't just the police, and maybe on it is you and your cell phone at all hours, right? But also behavioral health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also on it is and also at these meetings is somebody who can tell these owners, you do have some rights to vet. You do have some rights, and I don't know whether it is so or not, but with the COVID eviction moratoriums, but at some point you're going to have some rights to evict. I lived for a while in the Kenmore, and the management they basically take the position, they take the money and the people are in. I give you this example of this January 19th arrest. 4 or 5 warrants, including a first-degree murder one, and the guy moved in after those were on him. So somebody was not looking, right? So anyways, I'm looking for suggestions for how we can do something now and not try to, we can't fix the city. God bless you, you're trying, but we got to try to do something now. So any suggestions?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, part of one of the, we'll call it a suggestion, but really it's more of a we have to, from me with the city administrator and the task force that's working this stuff is, we've got to bring in the owners and the managers, and we got to hear from them. And it can't just be in, Ward 7 or, other places. It needs to be across the city. It needs to be a wide swath of them. And then likewise, as we're looking at going forward with doing voucher housing, and I'm kind of stuck on the voucher housing side because that gives us, we have more authority in that space. So with that, we can compel. If somebody wants to take a voucher and they're going to get market rate or higher based on that, then, I've asked the task force, what else do we need to put? What other strings do we need to tie to that on the management and the ownership? And there's a lot of discussion around that of how that works and what that would mean. So that's another piece in this. But for your particular case, where we've had issues that have happened, and get into those buildings, find out the management company, call them and tell them to come walk with us. Many times when, I'm the least big.
Don't lose your connection now. Turn off your video.
When I'm just a city servant, so when I put my name out there and I ask the management company and say, hey, the deputy mayor wants to come and walk through because we've had these issues. MPD has had to come several times. and want to understand what the issues are, an owner usually shows up. If they don't, then that's somebody we got to really figure out why they ain't showing up. But in many instances they do. And you know, that becomes a fruitful conversation at that point of how we can work together.
Okay, so
again,
so if I schedule, if the commissioner, particularly Commissioner Chang and I schedule some of these buildings in a row, can we call you up and will you come? And Lieutenant, will you come too?
absolutely.
Yes.
Good.
Just time of the date and I'll work it out.
Good. Lisa, do you want to go to community?
Yes. Just want to make
Karen
sure.
Caston has her name.
Yeah. Any commissioners have any other comments before we move on to community comments and give them opportunity to weigh in? Okay. There's been a lot of, so Lieutenant and Deputy Mayor Geldart, a lot of activity in the chat. So if anyone in the community specifically wants to come online to talk, please raise your hand. We have Karen promoted right now, and we'll start working through the chat as well. Hey, Karen.
Hi.
Commissioner,
Yep.
Thanks so much. Thanks for holding this meeting with Deputy Mayor Geldart. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Geldart, for coming. I want to start with one question that I did not put in the chat. You mentioned this task force of city executive agencies that is being chaired by the city administrator, Kevin Donahue. And you said that that task force, did I hear you correctly, started about 2 months ago? Is that what you said?
that's about right. It may have been 2.5 months ago, maybe 3. But it's new. It's not. It hasn't been around for a while. It's new.
Here's the reason I'm asking. Do you know that the mayor and Kevin Donahue, the city administrator, met with 8 tenant association heads, including myself, in a private home on June 8th?
Yes, ma'am.
That's 1 month ago. We invited the mayor to on May 9th was the invitation, and she didn't reply until just kind of the beginning of June. There was no sense at this meeting with the mayor that they were doing anything about the problems. And this meeting was specifically because all these tenant association heads were having these problems in their buildings. That was the purpose of the meeting. And so I just find it very interesting that there was no revealing, oh yes, we know this is a problem and we've already formed a task force and we're working on it. Nothing of that was said. We had 3 requests. The first one was make the data public for the voucher programs. And I understand, there's another member of this tenant association head group talking to me, Harry Garral. What was I going to say? Let me just think for a minute.
You're talking about the 3 points?
Yeah, so the first one was data transparency. Exactly what you're saying here. And we have submitted a FOIA request. The ANC has submitted a FOIA request. I think not this ANC, but
Yeah.
Is it this one? That, I don't think so. I
No.
think it's ANC 3F maybe, or
think-
it's the one that Deepa Mehta belongs to.
Yeah, it's been rejected too.
Claudette, David, they submitted a FOIA request, no response, no information. In 2019, a FOIA request was submitted by an ANC commissioner in ANC 3C. She got nowhere. But this information is available and it is known because the reporter who wrote the Washington Post story on Sedgwick Gardens that in 2019 that blew the lid off what's happening had a private source in the office of the mayor that told him 50% at that time, 2019, even then, 50% of the residents at Sedgwick Gardens held vouchers. Of that 50%, 40% were in need of very serious services. They were not getting them. I know many of the residents in my building who hold vouchers, and I know from them that their case managers don't come. And DHS, Laura Zeilinger, whom we also met with, swore on a stack of Bibles. What do you mean? We know, we have the proof, we have the records. Our case managers are coming. I don't know where the deception is taking place, but it's taking place somewhere because the services are not being provided. Now, the additional issue here is that because of the terms of the voucher programs, it's housing choice. The residents have a choice as to whether they want to accept services. And many of them don't. And many of them who don't accept services, and please understand this is not all of them, but a significant number who do not want to accept services really need them. They have very serious mental health issues. They are trafficking drugs. They are running prostitution rings in the building. They have criminal records. It's really kind of unbelievable. And the city does not want this to be known, is the impression one has to draw, because this is the way that the city is dealing with the homelessness crisis, is by putting people who are not, in many cases, not all, in many cases, not ready to live independently, are being put in buildings that are stable and are becoming incredibly unstable as a result. Now, in terms of barring people, very, very difficult. Sedgwick Gardens has 3 entrances. Only the front door is staffed. Now it is staffed, it's supposed to be staffed 24/7. And there are security monitors. They can see what's happening at the 2 other doors. But what are they going to do if a resident goes down and opens the door and lets whoever in? What can be done about that? You know, whether the person is banned or not. And I think it's true that a lot of the problems are caused by visitors to the residents, but not all of them. I don't know how to tell you really how serious the situation is at Sedgwick Gardens, which, by the way, has the same owner and landlord as the Rodman, where the guy was found stabbed to death in early May, and the same owner and landlord as Connecticut House, where the woman was pushed, I guess, out of the 8th floor window because her feet were bound. How would she jump out with her feet bound? And the police have not been very clear about what was going on there. The owner and manager and landlord of all 3 of those buildings is Darrow, D-A-R-O. And when Daniel McKinney was found stabbed to death at the Rodman, I think that maybe was May 12th or something. Yes, they started a guard service, but it ended the 3rd week in June. There is no commitment to ongoing security. I don't know, here is another member of our tenant association group whose management company is Horning Management, Karen Nicole, and maybe you want to hear from her next. I should probably stop talking unless you have questions.
Okay, and Kim
Farmer.
Yeah.
If I could real quick.
Yes. Did we just lose him?
We lost you for a minute here. Can you come back?
Hello?
Kim, hold 1 second. We're trying to find the deputy mayor.
Oh, okay.
He's lost in the ozone.
And just for the sake of time,
Just like you all do that meeting of the agents, probably right as the mayor was going into.
As she was going into the meeting with us? No, I don't think that's possible because the city administrator was meeting with the mayor and us. He was not in the meeting of the agencies.
No, okay, so let me be real clear. All right, I'm back on. I apologize. Let me be real clear. The mayor came to listen to the 8 associations that came together. Okay. Yep. The city administrator and myself are the ones that brought together the groups to first have an initial meeting to say, here's everybody that's involved in this, as I said earlier. Then here's the problem set that we're looking at, that we're trying to solve. That was just before the mayor went into the meeting. So I hadn't even had a chance to brief the mayor on everything that we've done there, neither had the city administrator. So I think the mayor went into that as a listening and then came back and we talked about what we were doing with this, and the city administrator then took on the leadership of task force that we're running. So it's not like there was a big long time frame before your meeting with her and the task force. It was really just getting going. Like I said, it's just been the last couple of months. It's really gotten going.
Yeah, but
so
we only
it's not like the mayor didn't mention the fact
ago.
that we have been trying to answer your questions. So it's not like the mayor was not saying whether we did or did not have that. I think the mayor wanted to listen to hear, what were the issues that were in the letter and that you all wanted to convey to her.
Yes.
Likewise, so there's not a conspiracy theory here where the mayor didn't say we've got this thing going on and we know all about this problem. I think all of this problem is coming to a head as she's meeting with you all to hear, from you all what you're seeing, as well as, hearing from the agencies. And I've been in many, many, many buildings across the city. And I have seen and talked to owners and talked to residents and seen the issues, brought folks out there, my fellow deputy mayor for the human services cluster out to see some of the things that so that they can see it first. We are recognizing that one, there may have been issues with some of the voucher programs that we have, and then what are those issues? And I would actually have folks take a look at this budget that just got passed by the council and see that there were additional vouchers added to the Department of Housing, to Department of Housing, and see that there are no services attached to those, even though we went back and said there needs to be services attached to them. So the chairman added on additional, and the council added on additional housing vouchers that now, same thing within this group that we're working with as we go forward, input from the meeting that the mayor had with you all and others that are out there in the community, as well as the groups that are working this and the community organizations that are working on this. How do we ensure that what we may have lost during COVID for in-person visits, what we may have that we're bringing back online, the stuff that we are doing, is that enough? Is it not enough? You know, this is all the process. And then how do we share that information? What information can be shared? Because I am more than positive if a FOIA request comes in, if I can't request to see where we have people in voucher housing throughout the city, a FOIA request sure isn't going to get answered that way, because the Fair Housing Act comes down like a ton of bricks on it. So those are things that we need to work through.
Or any apart, we never have asked for any personal information. I just really need to emphasize that point. So
and again, not being the human service guy here, being the public safety guy, to ensure that the public safety side of this is being addressed.
Well, let me just make a couple of other points, which is that at the end of the meeting on June 8th, the mayor still held on to this idea. Oh, so Sedgwick Gardens is an outlier. The whole purpose of the meeting was to say, no, Sedgwick Gardens is not an outlier. All these other buildings are experiencing the same.
And I think the deputy mayor gets that. I mean,
but the mayor didn't seem to, it was very surprising. And I just want to say one other point, because I don't know, to me, this is almost the most horrible thing, is with the drug trafficking in Sedgwick Gardens, they are actively recruiting and pressuring other residents. And they've recruited teenagers to be drug runners in the building. I have witnessed drug exchanges at apartment doors. I see that myself. And I see the people who, come 5 times a day for 15 minutes each time. What's that about?
Well, Karen, I think we're trying to find ways. We can't investigate it. The police on the line, with us are not going to investigate it. And we're trying to find ways that address the broader problem and get around some of the issues that the deputy mayor has brought up with
compelled security, compel it.
Yeah. Okay, let's hear from Kim Farmer.
Hi, good evening. This is Kim Farmer. I just want to thank Deputy Mayor Geldart. He was the person who he responded to in the ANC 3F meeting about when I had pressed about the problems in Connecticut Ave. He was one of the first in, I think, years who acknowledged the situation on Connecticut Ave and that there had been missteps. So that was huge. So I want to thank him for that. And public safety, MPD, has always been a partner throughout all of this. The problem, and I think maybe it's a discussion to have with Chevy Chase at some point. I've worked on this for 2 years and Karen's worked on this for probably 4 or 5 years. And the problems have always been the same. There's been no change with management, and it has all boiled down to the voucher rates. And DCHA and Director Donald has said that they should not be out of range of market. They're supposed to be rent reasonable. So it's very hard to understand there are so many units that are $2,520 for a mediocre older unit that is worth $1,200. So I'm a condo owner, so I'm part of the same group, and I met with the mayor. So I come at it slightly differently, but it's affecting so many, and it all comes back to the money. I mean, you have units and market rate renters at $1,200, and then you have somebody, an LLC or property management that puts in somebody at, you know, $2,520. Like, they don't care what a market rate renter says. They don't care about neighbors. They don't care about the person who is actually occupying the unit. There's a lot of people who struggle, have very serious problems. One of them attacked our front desk, sexually assaulted her, and lived there for the entire year. Thanks to Deputy Mayor Geldart's office, he was finally addressed to some extent, but it is such a cruel, I mean, this is a young woman working an hourly job. The incident happened a year ago. And the landlord never did anything about it. The city never did anything about it. My husband is also a victim of the crime in the neighborhood. It just goes on and on. And after studying it, it all goes back to those rent payment standards. And we're now talking with DCHA about it, and they seem to recognize that. But I think that the rest of the community needs to understand that there was a huge flock to Connecticut Ave of predatory LLCs taking advantage of this extremely high rate that is meant to access luxury units. It's not meant to access every single studio on Connecticut Ave. And that's what people did. And there are landlords in other parts of the city who are complaining that they can't get clients because the high value, units over on Connecticut Ave have been filled, and they don't want to, live in Brooklyn or in any other, perfectly fine community. So it would save maybe a lot of time to look at the dollar amount, and instead of thinking of how do we work with building managers, because a lot of them have proven to be they don't care after a year. I mean, Karen can speak to it probably better, and maybe Karen Nicole, but it's never changed. No matter what it is, there's victim after victim. And honestly, most of the victims I know are not the, white, person, NIMBY on Connecticut Avenue. These are like persons of color who are trying to get a chance and have a chance, and other voucher holders, and it's being destroyed for them. So I will end there, but thank you for listening.
Okay, I think that we need to bring this to a close. Thank you, Kim, and I'd like to talk with you further if you'd send me your connections. And thank you, Karen, I have yours. Thank you to Lieutenant Olivierre and to the Deputy Mayor. Mr. Geldart, I think I'm going to take you, we're going to take you up on this issue of walkthroughs and using you as the flypaper to get managers and owners to come and see if we can make some dent that way. So I will be back in touch, and I see that you put your phone in the chat, and I appreciate that. So I think with that, we should wrap this up, and I turn this back over to Lisa.
Yeah, thank you for Deputy Mayor Geldart and the Lieutenant. One thing that I would like to do is maybe for the commission to consider at some point in time an additional meeting on this somewhere down the road. I definitely like to follow up on those task force recommendations or actions, as you said. Whatever those actions are, I would love to see that be a little bit more transparent. I believe one of the community witnesses talked about just, transparency in the process. I think that's really important. And we will definitely have constant communication with Lieutenant Olivierre in terms of the issues that are going on over there. But at some point, I think we do need to follow this up and make sure that we understand the bottom line with what's supposed to happen and what's supposed to occur and what is actually occurring over there.
So I put that was my cell phone number that I put in there. I'm surprised that y'all don't have it already. Having been the emergency manager, the 911, the public works director, my cell phone number is all over the city. So y'all have it now.
Good.
And I do answer.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the time
Thank
that you
you.
put in tonight. Very much appreciate it.
A lot
Thank
of
you,
work still to be
Janet.
done, but thank you guys for all the questions.
Yep. Okay. So the last presentation is Commissioner Chang. You are going to take that up, and it is the Historic Chevy Chase DC's application for a grant to restore the call boxes.
Correct. They came and gave us a presentation at our last meeting. That particular application is up on our website under the June 27th meeting information page. So if you look at the tabs under meetings, you can find that, and you can find that particular presentation. But I thought I would just ask the commissioners, you've had 2 weeks to consider what was presented. They're asking for $2,000 grant to partially, not fully, but partially pay for the first call box. This is Historic Chevy Chase DC. They are the grantee, the applicant, but they are partnering with the Chevy Chase Citizens Association, which is now the Community Association, I believe. I think they're changing their name. The Chart, Chevy Chase Art, these are the artists, as well as Chevy Chase Main Street. And each of these organizations are providing some money, but also we have individuals who are providing money, meaning for the total cost of all the call boxes. And part of the cost, the $2,000, is to restore, meaning to clean, to design, and then to restore the call box. And they're going to start on Connecticut Avenue first. I believe it's Connecticut and Morrison. So are there any other questions about that particular grant? Hearing none, I'm going to make a motion that we approve this grant application, and they will, within the allotted, is it 120 days?
60 days.
60 days only.
60 days.
Yes, 60 days. They will start, they'll get the grant. They will start on the work, and they will be completed by September 17th, which is Chevy Chase Day, and we will be able to see it. So if there are no objections, I move for us to approve it. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Randy. And then all in favor? Chaz?
He's recusing himself.
I'm abstaining.
Recusing himself. Okay, 6-0. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm done.
0-1, 1 abstention.
No,
Yes.
Randy, you
It's
get
not,
like,
it's actually not an extension, it's a recusal.
Oh, he's completely recusing.
I
Okay.
had to change the minutes for that last.
Okay,
Okay.
let's get the minutes right.
All right, thank you, Connie. On to commission business.
I'm-
You want to go on, Peter, with the
Yeah, I've taken edits from Connie and Randy, including turning an abstention by John into a recusal by John. I move that we approve the, it's not the June 13th, it's the June 27th meeting. Our agenda says June 13th.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's the June 20, we've already approved the June 13th, so it's the June 27th minutes.
Okay, so this is a correction for the agenda. June, what was the date again? 17th?
No, 27th.
27th, okay.
You want to take a vote?
I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor? No recusals. Oh,
Okay. John? You want to talk
Okay,
about the
yeah.
financial report and the checks?
I have the treasury report. I have an addition for checks. So I'm going to make several motions here. First, I propose a motion to approve a check for $222.58 to Randy Speck for a Zoom reimbursement. So seconds,
second.
vote. Okay. And because of the grant, I think we should also authorize that check. So I propose a motion to approve a check for $2,000 for Historic Chevy Chase of DC for the callbacks project. So second,
Second.
vote. Okay. And also, we just got a Verizon bill, so I'd like to propose a motion to approve payment to Verizon for $163.68 for the payment due August 2nd. Second, vote. Okay, those are the three checks. Then I have submitted my treasurer's report, and I'd like to propose a motion to approve the ANC 3G report for fiscal 2022 quarter 3. Have a second on that? And a vote? You all got my notes on that. Do you have with the current balance and so forth? Does anybody have any questions on my notes?
You might just mention that for the record of the meeting. John.
Okay, all right. The minutes should show that the commission had a beginning balance of $26,052.95. In the quarter, we received $14,158.80 in the DC ONC allotment. We had expenses of $1,187.74. Our final balance for the quarter was $39,024.81. I also made a projection for about the rest of the year, but that doesn't necessarily have to be part of the record. And I'll clean these up and send them to you, Peter.
Got it.
For more accuracy.
Got it.
Anything further?
Nope. Does anyone have any other business? And Randy, and I don't know if it could be my oversight. Do you usually have a section in here where we ask for any business that wasn't on the agenda?
Not usually, no.
No.
That's
Okay.
usually covered at the beginning when we adopt the agenda. So
Okay.
we could add something there.
Randy usually talks about what comes up the next meeting. I don't know. What
Yeah,
you need to be.
I'm gonna add that in there. I just wanted to, that just popped in my head. So possible items for July 25th, report and
Before you
discussion
go-
of.
Connie has her
I
hand up.
do have an addition, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I have something I'd like to
Yeah,
raise.
that's what, yeah. Go
Because I
on.
didn't get a chance. It just came up in between, and I didn't think we should revise the agenda for that. But for Chevy Chase DC Day on September 17th, we were asked by Robert Gordon what role we want to play. And I thought this would be a good time for me to sort of say what these roles are, and we can make a decision on what we want to do. So there's 4 different roles. One is partner, second is co-sponsor, and the third is sponsor, and the fourth is supporter. So a partner is named in the promotional material as an equal participant in creating, providing the event, making substantial effort, facilities, finances, and or other material support. So DPR is a partner, for example, providing facilities, manpower, and other material things. And they have been a partner for many years for this event. A co-sponsor is pretty much the same, but provides less material input. A sponsor generally provides support for an event such as Child's Play provides a bounce house, Chart provides an art show, and puppet making for kids. A supporter is a participant in the event with a table and volunteer. So I personally don't know what role we actually played last year, even though I was there. I don't know if anyone else remembers.
I think it was just.
We had a table. We were very active. We had, the Office of Planning with their own table as well. I certainly helped them set up and everything, but I don't know what our formal role was. Randy?
I don't recall having a formal role, but I think we fall into the category of supporter.
Are there dollar amounts attached to this?
No, I asked what the difference was, and there was no dollar amount, but material input. I mean, it costs money to put a bounce house, of course, and it costs money to do these other things. But they're not asking us for money. It's not a grant. I think for sure we want a table. I think that is important to us, and I think that we can put things on that table that we want our community to see. But I don't know if we care to be anything above that, like a co-sponsor, sponsor, or a partner. But we were asked. And so what is it that we think we should do this time and then going forward?
I think supporter is good.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree.
So
Anyone else think differently? Chaz, what do you think? You seem to.
well, the table and a commitment for each of us to take some time at it. You know, an empty table is worse than no table.
Right.
Don't worry. Once you get in conversations with people, you're there for the whole.
John or Michael, do you have any opinion about the role that we should be playing?
No, I think we should do what we did last year. There were a few of us who came and sat at the table. Some stayed longer. I think you and Peter stayed the longest. It was a more, well, I don't know if it was a more or less active COVID environment, given the new strand. But some showed up less and others more. And I think that's all we're really capable of.
Yeah, I mean, last year I had DC Health come and give COVID shots. I mean, those kinds of things, but I don't think it meant that we were playing a particularly larger role or smaller role. So should I go back and say supporter then?
Yep.
Okay, then that's the decision. Thank you so much.
But Connie, also, you need to ask for a table because
last year.
Yes, I will add, well, the supporter says it is a participant in the event with the table and volunteers. So
You
that's
can
that
ask them,
category.
if that was our title last year, that's what our title should be for this year.
Yeah, I'll ask. Okay, thank you.
Chaz, did you say to ask for a table?
Yeah, DPR has X number of tables that they're going to allocate.
Yeah, we will have a
Okay.
table if we're supporter. We'll definitely have our own table there and we'll set it up. So we'll have to be there.
Okay.
And we'll figure that out amongst ourselves. Who's
Yeah,
gonna be there.
I got tons of tables now. If CPR doesn't have them.
All right. Peter?
Yeah,
Peter.
just to add to the possible items for next meeting, just add the Chevy Chase Circle resolution.
Okay.
And then Randy, you sent around a message that you said we needed to, if we were going to comment, we needed to vote on
Environmental assessment.
Right,
the environmental assessment for the
Drive.
For Beach Drive.
right. Either at next meeting or a special meeting, because the deadline is August 11th. And we don't meet in August. We have no scheduled meetings in August.
Well, let me just ask: is talking about the environmental impact statement tantamount to our talking about whether we like the idea of closing or don't like the idea? Because if it is, then we're going to go on forever on it because we have disagreements among ourselves about that. And
It would be a question really of whether we support the recommendation that NPS has for the seasonal changes in the use of Beach Drive, or whether we do not support that, or we support one of the other alternatives.
what do you want to do, Lisa? You think we could get that?
We should probably, I mean, didn't we do a resolution and weigh in on the first go around?
We did not, because at that point, there wasn't any decision pending or anything. They were still doing the assessment. So we've not weighed in on this. We did have a meeting about it, and we had a lot of comments from people. Councilmember Lewis George also had a meeting on it.
Right.
So I think it would make sense for us to consider a possible resolution or comments that we would submit. That's the nature of it. It would be supporting comments on the EA.
We can do it. I don't know what everyone's schedule is like prior to the 25th, but we got another hot topic on there is Connecticut Avenue reversible lanes. So this one will be a double hot topic.
Is there any need that we have to take that up at that meeting, or could we postpone that until September? Because there's nothing that's going to happen, I don't think.
There's nothing happening really.
Yeah.
Chaz, I mean, they did their public roundtable, the 2 sessions, they were exactly the same.
Right.
And, right, and
the real issue that's going to come, I think, before us is whether they extend the bike lanes up to the circle.
right, and that study will not be completed anytime soon.
Right.
That's they're not telling us it's going to happen. The only thing that is coming up with the protected bike lanes is the parking, and they're asking commissioners as well as residents about that, but there's no schedule. I don't know when these meetings are going to occur. So we could certainly, Chaz and I, report out at the next meeting, July 25th, if we know, like for us, when we can go meet with them. We don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think it may be premature for us to take this up at our next meeting.
Okay, so you want to substitute the discussion on the environmental impact assessment?
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Chaz, you agree, right? I mean, originally we
No,
were
I do. I think it's obviously a topic of great community concern, but there was nothing to act upon yet. And so if you read the listserv assiduously, and you may want to have a separate meeting at some point, but it's not ripe yet.
And I just point out that the district bridges thing, at least for Connie and me, is going to be a real issue. So I mean, we have another. It's not just the Beach Drive thing that's going to be a big issue. I mean, Main Street is a mess.
Right, and we really, I mean, I think they sent us something to read, and then we're asking them to do a presentation about what they've done and what they're going to do in the future, and that will be July 25th. But I expect to really ask some tough questions, and it could be that we need a follow-up after that, but we need some real results here. It's just taken too long, and we don't have a real partner in a lot of the things that are coming up, and we need that partner. So they have to get going, so to speak.
Who wants to tackle this resolution on environmental impact assessment? Or y'all want to? I think we should have 2 people and to really look it over.
It'll be really in the form of comments that we would make on the recommendation.
Well, you're into the
I guess I'm nominated.
Well, it's not just you, John, but it is Lisa too, because both of you border the park.
Yeah.
I keep saying my district is like Alaska. I have more land and less people.
Do we have a copy of the actual assessment at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
I sent it around earlier today.
Once
The assessment is not that long, actually. It's about 25, 30 pages, something like that, but there are a lot of attachments to it as well.
Okay, John, you want me and you to tackle it since we're close to the park? Okay. Okay. Anything else? So in addition to what we have, so for next meeting, we have, we're moving Connecticut Avenue reversible lane, substituting the environmental impact assessment for Rock Creek Park. Also discussion with bridges, right? District bridges. We're still on for that. Needed improvements to Chevy Chase Main Street. I also have a BZA presentation that will be on there that should be short and not very controversial.
And a quickie on the Chevy Chase Circle.
Right, the resolution for that. Okay. And just that's pretty much it, but I just want to add the email that I sent around on. I think we do need at some point to talk about the recommendations from our standing committees and get a hold of that. I was extremely disappointed to see that those race recommendations went to the council. And I don't think we can pull that back, obviously, at this point, but I do want to make sure going forward that our standing committees really understand the importance of working within our boundaries and guidelines. That's critical.
Wait, can I just understand that the race sent their own point to the council?
They were attached in one of the members' personal testimony.
I see.
So the answer is
Yeah.
yes.
But that's sort of a back end of outflanking the advisory thing.
Absolutely, and I'm really concerned with it. I don't know the best way to deal with it, and regardless of what the issue is, you know, whether I support the issue or not, we just can't have our standing committee members do that. That's a huge issue.
I think there should be, I would say that, you know, you and Randy as co-chairs, you should have an emergency meeting, frankly. I mean, that was such a surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing for a member to give personal testimony, but it's a whole nother to have that recommendation that was sent to the commission where you said in a public meeting, you do not accept it and you do not agree with it,
Well,
for that to
and
then go ahead to the council, right? Isn't that what happened? I mean,
that is what
That's,
happened.
that's totally against the charter for that committee.
Yep.
it is.
correct.
And in addition to that, the recommendation was not even supported by the full committee at all. There were
Correct.
lots of
There was no
dissenters.
signature. There was no signature, but it said the full committee. So to me, seeing that, it gives me caution as Peter and I are going to be co-chairs of the Zoning Design and Development Standing Committee. There's no way that we can have this precedent. So this has to be, there's got to be something said right away. We have to announce it at the next meeting. We have to do what we can. We cannot do this way. This is not.
Should we send a letter of clarification to the council as well?
Personally, I think we probably should send some clarification. The email I sent around today, I mean, I caught it at 5:30. So I caught it after the record had closed. Had I had enough time, or Randy, you know, somebody to write even a paragraph to get it in the record, I would have done that. I don't know if they will take it. I'm more than happy to call the council, but you know, they vote on it tomorrow. So at any rate, I think at the very minimum, maybe, you know, to call the council and let them know, you know, about that. But that is just a huge issue. We just cannot have that. That's huge.
So we ought to write something, because I think one of the, I mean, I had assumed that the way we would deal with this in recruiting people for the new standing committee is point to the bylaws and point to the language in the resolution. But if it turns out that that wasn't good enough for, I mean, I built the language of the resolution for the new standing committee on the raise. And if that wasn't good enough and didn't get the point across, we might want to put something in writing just so that this is something we hand to anybody who would consider joining any resident who would consider joining the ZDD. So I just.
You know, Peter, when Connie and I joined the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Connecticut Avenue thing, there was a charter. And we had to sign something saying that we agreed with it and would abide by whatever the drill was. I clearly don't remember the details, but it was a way of individually saying, I'm on board.
Okay, but in addition to that, though, I do think there needs to be an enforcement mechanism. So like, this is a violation. So what is the enforcement? Does the person who violates it, is this like almost like you get a violation, you know, like a ticket, you know, or you're told something? I mean, it cannot happen in this way. And it's not the full committee. So like, if the standing committee voted on it and the full committee by majority vote or whatever decided that this is what they're advancing forward to us as the commission, you know, there's got to be certain procedures that are followed, and we need to remind them of that. We need to ourselves look at it again to see, did we miss something? So I think it just, when things like this come up, it just gives us an opportunity to look at it again, to see if things are clear, and to do the things like what Chaz was saying, like have people sign, have people know what it is.
I think in this instance, it was clear, and it was just flat out a violation that was conscious and deliberate.
Exactly.
Maybe
Because we talked about it at that meeting, if you remember, and go back. We talked about it, and that person kind of said, oh, well, you know, I wasn't so sure, blah, blah, blah. We went over that during the ANC meeting. So, I mean, that is on the record in and of itself.
That's a record, but not everyone was there, meaning not all the members of the standing committee.
Well, but the person that released it to the council was there.
I was sitting there. I know, I was present. I remember that very well.
And they commented on the procedure.
Right,
So,
because there are no, and what is the repercussions of that? So the person took that action. What's the repercussion of that? It's like, we need to have that in writing. Like, if you violate this charter, you've signed, let's say, and you're in violation, what do we do?
You're off the committee. You're off the committee.
I think it could be definitely that. Also keep in mind that we, you know, on a yearly basis, we have recommendations for committees that have to be voted on and approved by the by the ANC. So that could be, you know, another avenue at two, but I think we have to really seriously consider that. And I don't know if we find that answer right here tonight, but you know, those are the two options that I think that we have to put on the table. Have to. That's hugely problematic. Hugely. Very problematic. That's so, you know.
Just in
I don't
terms
even
of
know
the
what to
perception,
say.
just in terms of the perception by the council, however, I think the council is very well aware that ANCs act only through the commission and not through their committees. And so
Thank goodness.
there's no confusion at the council, I think, about what our position is.
There's no confusion, but I am concerned about the possibility of influence. And I think we have to, you know, when you read something, sometimes you're just like, you accept it verbatim that this was, you know, something that was, you know, they don't know the backstory or the history.
Right.
They're looking at a document that comes from a committee and a committee of that title.
So we signed, okay, so we sign things. So we have our own meetings, and then we vote on a resolution, let's say, and we sign it, right? We have the chair signs it and the secretary signs it, right? In the standing committee, we need to have the same sort of procedure. So if what I'm hearing is the majority didn't agree with it, there was just a small group of people who went through, did that, put this document together, there has to be a formal procedure in some way, because, you
It
know,
was supposed to be. Yeah,
correct.
it just didn't have it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is important. And I think if you're a member of the community and you want to serve on a standing committee, you also want to know what influence do you have and what the procedures are. So it goes both ways, but I think there's got to be clarity. And if there is clarity, but there's still a violation, there needs to be some kind of like, you know, enforcement of that. Something has to happen.
Are we trying to settle this tonight? I mean, my suggestion is if, Lisa, you have a firm view on this, why don't you write something up and circulate it around, and or whoever does, you know, I mean, I think it's smart to write something. I think what Randy said means that we don't have to get too worked up about the council misinterpreting it, but we do need to have rules for the future. And frankly, my memory was when we first created the rates, this issue came up.
This was a huge issue.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but it seemed to me.
This was a huge issue, and if you remember, this almost, you know, it was one of the roadblocks to getting this committee implemented, because the commission was so concerned about just this.
Yeah. So I mean, we're closing in on 3 hours, so I'm just curious, why doesn't somebody write up a proposal of what we should do? And I'm all for it. So
I thought that we had said that they're going to vote on this tomorrow, so you want to get something in.
I don't think it'll make any difference.
Well, I don't know, Randy, if you might want to just have something on the record that says this was done in violation of the rules of our committee.
I think we should authorize Lisa to do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, is that she write up a paragraph that says simply, we don't need a resolution that just says it was ultra virus of the rules and it is not, so that it's in the record and there's no question about it.
Will it be in the record? It's past the record.
It's all we can do. It's all we can do.
I say do that, but also I think let us know if you have a raise standing committee meeting. I'd like to know that, and that everyone is aware.
All right, guys, that's it.
Thanks.
If we don't have any more, thank you
Yeah,
for being
thank you.
members that stayed on.
Now, somebody who's sending me tape? You.
I am. I still have the Zoom.
Okay, wait a second. I need to save the chat. Sorry.
Okay.
Are you going to pass the buck? Not the buck. Are you going to pass a baton on that?
What?
I can just,
Not now, but I mean, at some point, somebody else has got to get that Zoom.
at the end of the year, I certainly want to get rid of it by the end of the year.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can take it, sooner, Randy.
I got to figure out how to do that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
If I can just transfer it. I don't know. I got to figure that out.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Randy,
Thank
you're
you.
free to log off. Oh, no, you still got the Zoom account. You got to stay.
Yeah. Until Connie's done.
Yeah, I just have to copy the one question. Just give me 2 seconds. I
Okay.
think I've got everything, but just this one.
Everybody else can leave. It's fine.
But we're having so much fun.
Are you saving on light?
Sorry?
I just had to move computer rooms because my nephew was upstairs, and so it just the way the light hits the computer.
Okay, we can stop the recording, by the way. We don't
Oh,
have
I
to keep.
definitely need to do that.
Okay, bye.
See you, Michael.